Okay, guys, do you have any questions? We will be continuing from where we left last time. And last time we were talking about 10 usability heuristics of Jakob Nielsen. No, I haven't, Ramazan. I will talk at the end of the class today. Those 10 principles were quite important, and now I will be extending those superior interface characteristics and make further discussions today. I'm going to continue with the color compatibility. If you are designing a superior interface, a successful interface, that interface considers colorblind population. So, as we have learned, about 10% of the men and 1% of the women have color vision problems, differences, and our interfaces should not directly rely on color, rather use the color as an additional information source. So if the only information is given through color, then it may give problems to certain people. Anytime we use color to send information in the interface, we should also use clear secondary cues to send the information, to convey the information to those who won't be experiencing any color coding today. Okay. Secondary cues can consist of anything from the subtly of grayscale differentiation to having different graphic or different text label associated with each color presented so that they will be recognized differently. Text is okay, or shape. If you confine a person to a room and does not present roads as the output, if you don't present doors going out, then explorability performance is reduced. So that goes back to visibility and navigation. That's the since this is the secondary that is related to visibility and navigation of Jakob Nielsen. Give users well-marked roads and landmarks, then let them shift into four-wheel drive, meaning that let them explore, let them try to find ways to understand the environment in the application. So roads and doors must be marked very well so that they can be explored. They should not be hidden. Try to make similar approach as the landscape, as the real life, smoothness, consistency, and natural behavior, natural behavior such as continuity. Continuity is natural. Don't trap users into single path through a service, such as next, 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 and. So they should always be able to come back add additional things, do other things, and continue. So a single path of service is only desirable when you have things like application to something where you want to guide the interaction. Otherwise, for free information browsing and resource applications, or applications that work on documents, for example, and objects, then you should not trap users into a single path of service because they may be thinking differently than you are. But give them a path so that they don't feel being trapped, but they follow the path that you suggest. Okay. So as you get closer to beginner level, you have to guide, you have to direct users. You have to keep control of users if the user is beginner. There are single-use applications, such as a kiosk or a ticket machine or vending machine. Those are single-use applications. You just come across and use the application. Those are far more directive than the habitual use interfaces for experts. So if it is a one-time interface, you should think differently. If it's a kiosk, if it is a web page for joining a campaign for Migros, for example, for a grocery store, you will only use once through your mobile application, then it should be directive, more directive than regular applications. Otherwise, in many applications, try to find a neutral state of the application, such as home. Eventually, that led to a home in the web page, www.home, home concept. So home concept is a concept where you go back and try from the beginning. Everything is there, so you can have the path beginnings of the path to all directions from the home. So that's like main menu, home, ana sayfa, ana ekran, main, etc. Sometimes there are web applications. You click on some button, it opens up another window or another tab. And some users are trapped because when they click back button, there is no back. They cannot find the underlying previous window. What they do is they close the application in order to get back and start from the beginning. That's quite a difficult experience.
That's why I couldn't use iOS for a very long time. I just couldn't understand how you go back without a button. After a very long time, I finally understood that you have to swipe to go
Button.
back. It was back in the days, of course.
Here, right? This part at the bottom in the
Yeah,
browser.
in Android and most of the other phones, you
Yeah.
have a button. Back in the days, of course, not now.
The the solution is if you are doing something with web always rely on on-screen controls. Do not rely on browser control, never. So if a person wants to go back, there must be a back button on screen, not on the browser. So that means you have to have a menu, main menu, and the main menu should be able to should be reachable from all points without using the browser buttons. Browser buttons are dangerous actually. Also, today it's not that much big issue, but in the past there were problems with the state keeping the user state, because in some screens there are cookies and new state variables like login variables. When you use browser button, the login variables and credentials cannot be transferred if you use the browser button, because browser back is something different than actual back. If you use button in application button, you can transfer the user state, but with the browser back button, user state is a state that is the previous state. You cannot carry the user state through. Quit was difficult in the past because people didn't want you to leave the application. But with the web kind of applications, we started to see links, and applications are invoking on mobile, for example, applications invoking one another. So leaving the application became easy. So staying in the application is sometimes difficult because it contains links. Therefore, do not rely on menu bar, and if you are doing complex operations like banking, open up your own window. That's what they are doing now. And they turn off the menu bar. They don't have menu bar and address bar. It's just a plain window. Then provide your own navigational cues rather than browser cues, because if you use browser cues, the programmer cannot control what's happening easily. User can click on other things that you don't expect. Sometimes in the mobile world, you don't want to quit the application. What you want is your application to stay at the background. Therefore, you can also try to do that for certain reasons. So don't let people to quit, but move to other applications with or without deliberate reasons. So your application can still work on the background and keep, for example, keep logging the user's location and keep working from time to time. We see, therefore, some applications making quitting very difficult on purpose. Fitts law is the law that is related to the speed and accuracy trade-off of human limbs and organs. Try to obey what Fitts law suggests. So try to not to make buttons too small, and try to minimize the movement of the mouse, because movement means time. Try to put frequently used items to the closer space where the mouse is going to be. So if the mouse is at the top because the menu bar is in the top, frequently used items should come in the menu to the upper section on the list, because you will click and move down. So frequently used ones should be at the upper level because of the distance you should travel. Large objects for important functions and frequently used buttons should be bigger if possible. And another thing is, if I am going to click a button which is very on the right of the screen, I move with my mouse in a very fast way and click, and see, it doesn't click. Why? Because there is one pixel. This is my screen. There are buttons on the screen. This is my mouse. I move my mouse, trying to make an arrow here. I move my mouse very fast because I have to be fast. Suddenly I click here, which is very narrow place, and click doesn't go through. Click doesn't happen because it is outside of the button region. So button is active only here. So this is a bad idea. What you should do is, if you have buttons at the very edge of the screen like this, don't make space here. Even if you display it smaller, make the active region, active clickable region, to the end of the screen so that you move quickly and click without thinking where to stop. You move with your mouse in very fast fashion and click. You don't have to stop and adjust endpoint. Go there and click, and it works. It is much faster. The research showed that 1 pixel boundary can result in 20%, 30% slowdown in such circumstances. Because if you want to be fast, then sometimes you click on the right side, on the empty side of the button, and you fail, and you have to make a secondary click in order to go through. This is interesting, and we see a lot of button shapes on screens to the edges of the screens, because they are connected to the edges. When you move fast, you don't have to stop. It is limited with the hard boundary, so your mouse cannot move further unless you have a virtual desktop. So since your mouse cannot move further, your button is clicked very easily. Another interesting implication is, you have a menu, a pull-down menu, secondary level, and third level. So you click here, okay? You follow through. Do you understand? Multiple levels of hierarchical menus. It becomes very difficult to follow through. And what people do is they click here. This menu comes up. Let me draw again. They click the top. This menu comes up. They move here. This menu comes up. This opens up and you go back, think about, because you are expecting to release your finger to activate. Your finger is pressed. Suddenly, you try to click on this, but it disappears because you are moving through this region. So if you click here, come there, as you are trying to go here, you may go outside because this part is very narrow. So when you are doing hierarchical menus, make sure that the width of the menu, this width of the menu, the size of the path should be big enough. Furthermore, there is another one. You click on this and some people make these kind of menus. 4 columns. Turkcell, for example, did that. And when you click on this, there are 4 different sections open. And you want to select this one. Okay. The designer expects you to move in this direction. In that case, it may work. But since the target is here, you automatically follow this path. When you follow this path, there is a region that is not active in the menu. So on the way out, this menu disappears. By the time you come here, because it's an automated behavior, by the time you come here, there is no menu anymore because you passed through a region where the menu is not present. It is at the background. Therefore, when you are expecting these kind of and click this kind of behavior from users, please also check the condition that users sometimes move like this, and if this area is not in the menu region, the menu gets disappeared. So user failures may occur. So how to prevent that? Put some delay to keep the menu there because the person is traveling with the mouse. Or if you click change the state so that menu doesn't go away until you leave the mouse. Okay, some user interfaces expect you to open the menu. Menu is there, you move, click again. Some others, you push, move, release. So as you move, you should not deactivate the menu. Some applications do that on the web and on the applications, and it is wrong. I think it's good enough. Latency in Turkish arayüz kasıyor thing. Latency is interesting. If user experience latency with or without acceptable reasons, quality perception diminishes, reduces significantly. Therefore, in order to reduce experience of the latency, there are certain tricks and things to remember. One thing, learn how to code multi-threading. So when you are developing an application, try to write your application in a multi-threaded way. Usually applications, traditional applications, traditional approach has a big while loop. Okay, a big while loop, and your program runs as long as your while loop is running. But that while loop may have a send message from the client to server, and here another flash icon, something. So if the messaging takes too long, then flashing icon cannot be repeated, so icon stays there. Therefore, if possible, use multi-threading application. You do not have single while loop. Implement a user interface section working separately than things that are taking time. Therefore, latency is pushed at the background rather than foreground. Foreground is the user interface. User interface still responds very fast. If you put time-taking pieces of code within the user interaction code, actual work code, along together with the user interface, then user interface will slow down if the job is taking too long. You may sometimes want that, but you should do it with the progress bar, not by locking the interface. To overcome that, as said here, use multi-threaded application. So what are the numbers? There is a magic number, 50 milliseconds. 50 milliseconds. Acknowledge all button clicks by visual or oral feedback within 50 milliseconds. So if I click on something, that's true for mobile too. If I click on something within 50 milliseconds, interface should respond. Otherwise, you start feeling the delay. It becomes perceived as slow. If the things are going to take between half a second to 2 seconds, up to 2 seconds, put a clock, hourglass, or rotating bar, rotating ball, something, so that people will understand it's going to take some time, but not too much. It's going to take some time. Let's wait. It's doing something. And move the hourglass. Also, spinning the hourglass little bit faster gives the perception of speed. So if you rotate the hourglass slowly, users will feel that the program is working slow. If it is rotating slightly faster, like 1 rotation per second or 2 rotations per second, then it means it will feel that the application is quite fast. It is interesting. So try to rotate it fast. Animate that's what I said. Animate the hourglass so that the system hasn't died completely. If it is more than 2 seconds, display a message indicating that the potential length of the wait for any action that will take longer than 2 seconds. So this may take some time. Do you want to continue? Or this may take some time and start doing it. Sometimes log scroll is good. You keep putting things on screen, showing the file names quickly, briefly. Then user will feel that something is being installed, something is being done, some messages are going and coming. Therefore, users become happy by seeing those feedback messages. And that will eliminate the perception of slow machine. Sometimes, only because of the interface, people will change their hardware. They think that the hardware is not fast enough, but in reality, it is the user interface that is creating that kind of illusion. If you can do a progress indicator, progress bar, or filling up clock, any kind of progress indicator. It could be circular too. Then it is good. Or putting text messages, keeping users informed. If it is a long process, entertaining them, explaining certain things, such as saves, completed, such as antivirus checking. So those are also helpful rather than becoming silent. You did something and the system is taking some time. If that time is more than 10 seconds, such as an antivirus, when you return, make a beep or large visual indication, because users are probably looking to somewhere else. If the process is going to take more than 10 seconds, user is switched to WhatsApp messages, Facebook, or newspaper, or going back to article that he was reading. So user task is switched to something else. So when your process returns, it should make a beep or make a big flash, a big display, some alerting system, so that you are notified with the end of the task. One interesting issue with the speed and the interfaces, when you click on something multiple times, that means you are trying to do that. You are trying to turn it on. Even if you press 3 times, 2 double clicks or 4 double clicks, it never means that you are trying to start 3 instances of same application. You never want it. What did you want? Tell me. You click on Microsoft Word, no response, click again, no response, click again, no response, and suddenly 3 Microsoft Word pops up, or 1 pops up and gives a message that it is already open. You should understand that user is clicking multiple times on the same button because he or she is not getting feedback. If she gets feedback for clicking, then he or she won't do it. So she is or he is clicking the icon because she is not getting the feedback. Therefore, if you have multiple clicks, if you trap multiple clicks on the same button, use it as a single click, because it is only required once for a couple of seconds. User never tries to start up multiple copies of the same application unless it's kind of fireworks or something very strange. Let me show you something if I can find. Okay, I'm going to find you something, and let's give a break for 5 minutes, or 10. Let's give a break for 10 minutes, so we can start at 10:30. Oops, sorry.
Okay, see you in 10 minutes, sir.
10 minutes. Bir dakika yazayım şuraya. Bu arada video koyalım bakalım.
Win at work by communicating effectively with Grammarly.
Meet Ty.
He is email.
Program open. Inspire Microsoft Windows, Macintosh 1 can most, and even SCSI drive. This will need some information, so you'll need to swap disks again, and then again back to
Okay. Good. Ses geliyor herhalde. Videonun sesi de gelmesi lazım.
Evet, duyuyoruz.
Burada Macintosh ikonuna tıklayınca görülen feedback'e dikkat edin. Kare 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 çizgiler çıkacak, büyüyecek.
In the early 1980s, most computers were unruly and complicated beasts. If you wanted to use a program, you had to know the proper command line functions in order to get a program started. And once you had the program open, the only practical way to interact with it was with the keyboard. This was the case across the board for computer manufacturers, but then came a new way of doing things from Apple with the Apple Lisa. Taking cues from the Xerox Star, it used a graphical user interface, or GUI.
Star.
It replaced the command line with easily understood icons and windows, along with an input device to use it, known as a mouse. The computer itself was huge, though, with a price tag to match, and it ultimately failed to make a dent in the marketplace. But in 1984 came something that changed the face of computers forever: the Macintosh. It used the same GUI and mouse as the Lisa, but came in a smaller, more affordable package. It sold quite well and went on to inspire Microsoft Windows, GIM, and a host of other OSs. And may its legacy continue through suburban, culturally aware, sweater-wearing hipsters, today and forevermore, in the name of Steve Jobs, amen. The original Macintosh came with 128K of RAM and is known as the Macintosh Model M0001. When looking to acquire one, be aware that the machine is also known as the 128K or Macintosh 128. This can either refer to the launch model version of the machine or the later version of the Macintosh, the 128. This later one is relabeled as the 128 on the back of the machine, where the original is not. The machine was essentially the same thing, just retroactively labeled the 128K to differentiate between it and the recently released 512K. There are several other models which came later, like the Plus and the SE, but these are outfitted with much different hardware than the original Mac, though they can mostly run the same programs. I got my original Macintosh for $50. I got it from an ad on Craigslist from a guy who had bought the machine around May of 1984, just a few months after it was released. It didn't come with a mouse or keyboard, so I had to get those separately on eBay. In total, it came to $90 for a complete machine. If you're looking for mice, there are a few to choose from, with those from the Lisa 2 and Mac Plus working just fine with it as well. The model number is M0100 and can vary between beige and platinum gray colors. There is also the 128 keyboard, which can be difficult to find. The original is model number M0110, but you can use the later Mac Plus keyboard, which includes a numeric keypad. The keyboard itself isn't so hard to find as the cord is. It uses a detachable cord that looks just like a phone cord, but it isn't. It's actually wired differently, and while you can make your own keyboard cord using a phone cord, having the original is just pro and will save you a lot of trouble. The Mac itself contains 128K of RAM, an 8 MHz Motorola 68000 CPU, a 3.5-inch floppy drive, and no hard drive. The only way to get input into the machine is by booting into Mac OS from a 400K system disk. This can also be another pain if yours didn't come with the disk, since it uses that odd Macintosh file structure for 400K disks that aren't usable on PCs. And even if you have a later Macintosh with a 3.5-inch drive, you'll need a proper disk image, special software, and the correct OS version to write it to a disk that is readable. Once it loads the OS, you can then swap disks to run a program. Naturally, being as this only has 128 kilobytes of RAM and the slowest 68000 processor, you are really limited to what you can run. Mine came with a third-party 2MB RAM expansion with a SCSI port on the back, so it gives me more freedom to run larger programs, and I could also attach an external SCSI drive if I wanted. While this is not necessary, it's actually quite nice to have and was apparently a pretty common upgrade. And thanks to its appliance-like design, setting up and starting the machine is amazingly simple. Groovy. However, loading a program can be a huge hassle. Now, the macOS GUI is great and certainly makes things really nice and easy when compared to a command line interface, but that does not help with the endless disk swapping. For instance, you'll need to load part of a game, but then maybe the OS will need some information, so you'll need to swap disks again, and then again back to the OS, and then back and forth and back and forth. It gets
Feedback'i
old
gördünüz mü?
instantly. And you can't run more than one thing at once at all, so you can't just load something into RAM and be done with it. You'll need to swap those disks for anything that's not on the operating system disk, which is probably just about everything, and then swap again once you're done, and probably a couple of times in between that. Seriously, you almost need to get an external drive like the MO130, or it's just impossibly aggravating. So, what can you actually do with the thing? Well, if somehow you haven't noticed, it houses a built-in 9-inch monochrome display, so you won't be seeing any colors. Unless you drop some acid first, I guess. This screen was the real killer feature that made the Macintosh attractive, as computers like the IBM XT were still using low-res CGA, so any graphic and design applications were really fruitless endeavors. But the screen really is tiny, so it's not very well suited for serious graphical work. And there's no real sound either, other than some simple bleeps and bongs. Well, you can use MacWrite to write about how since you now own a Mac, you have the sudden urge to purchase a bicycle and vote libertarian. Or you can use MacPaint to create delightfully postmodern digital Banksy ripoffs. Do watch out though, as I discovered participating in such activities on a Mac can have undesirable side effects.
Curse you, Steve Jobs!
There are a few games that you can play, though they can be extremely difficult to find nowadays. Gaming on the Macintosh really didn't start to take off for another couple of years, so most of the games will require more RAM or more processing power to run. But there are a few notable titles, and here are some of those for the 128. And like I said, these games can be seriously hard to find. Mostly what I've done is perused the wonderful Macintosh Garden website. It may be of dubious legality, but the site is awesome and the files come in a format that can usually be written to disk on other Macs with an internet connection and a disk drive. And of course, it's always worth mentioning that there are a few notable emulators for the system, like Mini VMac, which really do a good job of emulating the machine. But really, if you're going to emulate a Macintosh, why not emulate a system that can do stuff? So, is the original Apple Macintosh 128 worth buying or not? Well, that depends completely.
Okay. On the interface, either in mobile or on kiosk or regular PC, laptop, desktop, readability is interesting and important factor. High contrast, black text on white or pale yellow backgrounds is preferred. High contrast is preferred. Here we have high contrast and we have white background and it is more readable. So if I try to make my background, for example, gray, readability is diminished. So avoid gray backgrounds for aesthetic purposes. Some people do it, and don't use different colors unless there is a meaning. Make font sizes that are large enough to be readable on the standard monitors, on the monitors that are designed to be used by the user. Large characters for the actual data you intend to display as opposed to labels and instructions. So actual data should be differentiated by text from the instructions. Instructions should be, for example, italic and lighter, whereas actual data is more bold and put in a rectangular box, for example, if it's an editable thing. So actual data should come forward rather than instructions. Some older people have different abilities. One thing is to focus and concentrate. So if the system is going to be used by older people, pay particular attention to their needs. Sometimes their vision is not so good. Sometimes the short-term memory is bad. Short-term capacity of the short-term memory is lost. So if you say multiple things one after another, they forget the one at the beginning, and they had to iterate. They have to repeat reading. Tracking the user state has been an important part. Also, in the recent years, in the last 2 or 3 years, it is more important than ever because of commercial purposes. Companies want to track what user is doing on screen. If it's an e-commerce site, what you are looking at, what you are moving at. Did you click and did you come back? Which pages you visit? Also, they started tracking you even if you did not log in to the system. So they try to understand what users are doing, which is very valuable information. So try to keep where the user is, where the user is going. What did they try? What did they fail? What they have done. So we call this as clickstream analysis, and that will enable us in predicting what user is trying to do, and then we can help users, or we can show users more relevant choices, including relevant items to sell or shop. So it also has business value in addition to make the user interface more enjoyable and usable. One example design I would like to talk about is option cover. This was in climate control. And the idea is put the most significant, most important information forward and not that significant information backwards as an optional. So one hardware device is put a lid here. So main controls are here. Simple controls. But optional controls like programming, setting, etc., setting rules, so advanced rules can be put under cover. Why did they do it? Because they could have put these buttons in front, but in that case, the user interface will be very hard to use. Nobody is trying to deal with these all the time, so they put a cover. So for inexperienced people, for casual use, only these are sufficient. For advanced use, you open the cover. So this is a very good example and can be implemented in software. For example, in find replace dialog, there is an arrow in the dialog. If you click on the arrow, additional selections are displayed. Otherwise, basic operations are implemented through dialog. So further options can be given if user asks for it. Otherwise, they are not shown. Then the whole task is much easier. Some operations require data entry. Unless you are writing a homework or article or a book, unless you are writing an email, writing a text document, that means data entry is less frequent in human-computer interaction. It is mostly selection, giving commands, etc. Without a keyboard, data entry is not easy. Therefore, when you don't have the keyboard, or even if you have a keyboard, data entry is not easy. Therefore, default values must be utilized in order to reduce amount of data. Giving examples to guide the interaction, such as phone number. Sometimes in gray. So giving examples, starting like this, +90 for the phone numbers. Smart lists, as we have discussed last time, increase the efficiency, and selection rather than entry reduces the errors. So recognition rather than recall must be preferred in data entry screens. That speeds up and reduces the errors. Thinking about keyboard and mouse, this is very well-known issue. Mouse is slower than keyboard. So moving many tasks to mouse is not going to help if it is a business application. In business applications, users usually put their hands on the keyboard. So in order to move to mouse, you have to put your hands off the keyboard and hold the mouse. That takes time. Find the cursor and move it. Therefore, continuously used systems, business systems, should not rely on positioning devices that much. Keyboard must be preferred as much as possible, such as tab keys, space keys, command keys. All those keys are much faster than working with the mouse for each field. Wrist and arm fatigue occurs if you rely on mouse too much. In the banking applications, for example, the banking applications used in the banks should rely on the keyboard as much as possible. When they renew their systems, they thought graphical user interfaces would be more efficient for many parts. Yes, that reduces errors for certain reasons, but the speed-wise, they are relatively problematic. So switching between fields from one field to another field, for example, when you have a form, adı, soyadı, adresi, etc. Switching between the forms can be done in two ways. You click on the field, and click on the other field, click on the other field. The actual switching should be done through tab. When you press tab key, the active field should move. So that should be utilized in business applications and should be utilized very carefully. Active region should be displayed in different colors so that the user understands which field is active. One of the frustrating things in filling forms is you get the form open, start typing, and then suddenly you realize that the first field is not clicked. Page comes. First name, last name, etc. The page comes. Okay, you start typing. As you start typing, you have a message. Please click field if it is intelligent. If it is not intelligent, nothing happens. Nothing happens. And then you realize that nothing is happening. You try to look for models that explains the user, that explains the interface behavior. You realize that you have to click. Maybe I have to click. So then you click on here and start typing. After you click on here, maybe you can switch to the next field by clicking on the tab. Unfortunately, if you press enter, okay, if you press enter here after you fill your name, it may try to submit the form without completion and will give you another error. These are interesting issues. Yeah.
There is one issue that comes to the user so many times. I've realized some error happens, or you have to refresh the page, thinking the entries you have already written will come back when you refresh the page, but they're gone. This is so frustrating for lots of people, and you start to not do anything you have done and just leave the page because it makes you angry.
Yes. So if you save the state in the next screen, you can have the form half filled on the next screen. But if you don't save the user state after the user error, then the whole data you entered becomes lost and you have to enter again, which is very frustrating. Yes, and that is usually occurring, either you forget to fill certain form because they are not visible, or you fill them incorrectly. And incorrectly filling should be checked on the fly before you enter. Before you hit the submit, it must be checked. I'm going to go over that in few minutes. If data is entered, is coded, such as A is for ön yıkamalı, B is for pamuklu, that means you are going to look somewhere, get the code like A, and press letter A somewhere else. In that case, if it's a device, this code table should be placed next to the entry device, not at the back of the device. So don't expect people to memorize it. It should be available to users, that kind of coding. If the user is entering data, such as phone number, or name, or apartment name, apartment number, they think that data is correct. Nobody thinks that the data they enter is incorrect, but sometimes data is incorrect. So we should remind them what the error is, and we should not erase, that is what you have said. Entered values should not be erased when returning back from the next screen. You have to keep the data on screen. This is extremely important with the devices without keyboard. When you have mobile application, so text typing, address entry is very difficult. So if there is an error, when you're back, typing all the data again is very frustrating, and you usually leave the task. Therefore, with the devices without keyboard, more are you sure messages are required for these purposes. Are you sure to submit? And checking things on the fly is more important on mobile applications as you type. Dynamic checking, field controls, etc. This is an apartment building, and basically a ring door communication system. And you either type your friend, you are trying to reach your friend. You either type 124 and call. Call is here. Then door rings and your friend opens the door. Or you can browse. So giving different ways of accessing the information is important. If you are a frequent user, just type the apartment number. But if you don't know the apartment number, you can go through the name. So this way they can search through the names, because on the old door ring buttons, you have names: Göktürk, Öztürk, Ali, Veli, etc. So those names can be searched. as opposed to the old-fashioned ring button. That's a good example. Although old example, it's a good example. Sometimes you have, as we have discussed a few minutes ago, you have forms. This is always the case when multiple information in one screen is needed. So for long application forms, credit card information, shopping, business screens, student registration, etc. Why is it that way? Because they are similar to paper forms. For advanced users, for educated users, for non-casual users, it is better to move between keys, to move between fields. Tab key must work because you are using the keyboard. Each field may contain selection control. So, for example, you move to the field and the field has 3 radio buttons. So when you move this field, okay, spacebar should change between these radio buttons, and then tab again, you move to the next field. So tab, 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 spacebar, tab, spacebar, 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 tab should work. Also, if it's a pull-down menu, when you move to the field, then spacebar pops up the menu, spacebar pops up the menu, and then you use the arrow keys. Okay, and if you press tab again, and that one is selected. So no mouse is required for form-based data entries. You should test your application, your desktop or laptop application, so that mouse is not used for business applications. For less casual users, less frequently used systems like kiosks or application to somewhere or advertisement response, one-time used applications. It goes like question and answer dialogue. It is good for beginners. We call them wizards for personal computing interfaces, but we don't call them wizards for kiosks, for example. Advanced users may dislike it after repeated use. For if there's a dual use, both advanced users and beginners use the same system, you should give some escape routes to advanced people. It reduces the error. Wizards reduces the error. It takes longer for task completion. And if you have small screen, obviously you cannot show the form. So next kind of going is easy. And for smaller screens, it is easy. Also, if the previous data is checked and subsequent screens change based on the previous answers, then wizard-based data entry is good. Otherwise, your form will say, for example, there is something, it will say, skip the next question if you give no to the following question. So that is basically, this one says skip the next question if the answer is no. So that kind of approach is basically coming from papers. In the paper document, it may say skip the next question if you have the following, but since you are using the wizard, you already know the answer of this question. So the next part can be skipped by the software, not by the user. So if the procedure is branching, then those branches can be implemented with wizards in much better performance. If you have small screens, there are other issues. One of the reasons that we make errors is we make mode errors. We forget which mode we are working in. We are in test mode, but we are using it as working mode, or we are in setup, but we think that we are in shooting. We are in video mode, but we are in photograph mode. So mode is interesting property. For that purpose, if you are in a small screen, we remind user about the current mode so that user keeps the mode in their head for decision making, because mode changes your mental model. Your mental model has different modes. So for mode 1, you have different mental model. Mode 2, you have another different mental model. Mode 3, other mental model. Depending on the mode, your mental model switches. So if you remind the mode from the user interface, the person does not have to estimate the mode, or does not have to keep the mode information, memorize the mode information all the time. You have to if you remind it, which is very important. At the beginning of the year, I have shown an airplane accident, and unfortunately there was an accident yesterday in China. I'm not sure, but probably they will blame the pilots, and usually it will turn out to be a user interface error, user interaction error. And the most common reason is failure to understand current situation by the pilots. They cannot understand the current situation, and then they give incorrect commands. You may have smaller screens like this. These smaller screens should be designed very carefully. Some part of the screen should be reserved for indication of current mode and other information. It could be, if it's a dual line information, it could be a line, it could be a bar at the beginning, or some small dot on the right, some 2 characters here, or you can flash the text to indicate that you are in different mode. You can underline a character. You can blink a caret Okay, you can blink everything. Therefore, a person is reminded about the mode. You can also put LEDs next to the screen up here so that different modes are conveyed to user. That mode thing is very interesting. We say for many applications, there is a main screen. This main screen is called as controlling dialog. Main control. Controlling dialog in a desktop contains of menus, tabs, toolbars, and action buttons, command and action buttons. So main, menu, then toolbar, then some buttons. These become the general layout of many applications. How you organize this comes from the user and task analysis completed as a part of the software engineering process. If it's a banking applications, what you do in the bank? Send money, receive money, make an investment, send money to abroad, other countries, which is SWIFT, etc. Pay for the invoices, pay the bills. Give gifts to foundations. That's what you do with the banks. Get credit, open a gold or silver account, and so on. In future, you may have get a credit for the phone, get a credit for this phone, etc. Or put money to some petroleum, buy some petroleum and leave it in Saudi Arabia so that it will be yours, but you can sell it later. So that's part of investment too. So you can buy and sell certain things. So this is how you realize a banking process. Therefore, the menus, toolbars, command action buttons should be, these components should be organized in such a way that user expects these things in the interface. These are the main things. So main operations should come accordingly from the task analyst in the software engineering process. I think most important one is the menu. It's a common piece of complex user interface. It provides us recognition rather than recall. It reflects the system behavior. So when we say menu, top level menu, these are the menu bar menus, like file, edit, view, etc. Most of them, the beginning ones are system related, later ones are application related, and probably on the very right, you will have help. Then you have other selections, and then other selections. So menu tree structure should reflect system behavior. Deeper menu levels for small screen devices are preferred because in a small screen device, scrolling is not easy. Therefore, display certain selections, user click, display another screen, another screen, another screen. Therefore, when you don't have big real estate, big screen, you may have a lot of menus shown at the same time, but big menu lists. But for the small screen devices, rather than having too many levels, too many selections in one level, reduce them and put those on other levels. There are levels, so multiple levels are available. This is the first level, this is the second level, this is the third level. Increase the levels for small screen devices. For big screen devices, wider menu is preferred. If the numerical keypad is only device, menu items should have numbers associated with them. That's interesting. Assume that this is an industrial device, machine. And on screen, this is your screen. It says and you have numerical keypad, some other keys, but you have this kind of interface, and in that case, you can have up and down control, but since you have numerical keypad, make the advantage of numerical keypad. So if you press 2, this will be selected. Although it is menu, you can select it through keypad, which is very powerful. So if the numerical keypad is only input device rather than positioning device without mouse or scroll, having those numbers next to the menu items helps a lot. So try to do that if it is appropriate in the case. When planning pull-down menu structure for an application, there is a horizontal menu and there are vertical choices. This is the first level. At the top, this is the first level. This is the first level, top. These arrangement of these entries must be based on the user's view of the logical structure of the application. So if user thinks that the banking application should have certain functions, road to those functions must be provided from here. So main roads. So that he or she can start discovering. Arrangement of these must be based on the user's view of the application. That means maybe something is important, but user thinks it is not that important. It should not come at first. It should come in the next level. Try to use single word if possible. That's also correct for Turkish. Try to make it single word if possible. If not, obviously, double words. Make sure that all users understand the word. If there is submenu, reading both together should sound like a phrase, such as, channel delete. This is good. This is bad. Actually, no. Here when you say channel delete or delete channel, since you are in channel, delete channel is not good. Delete is sufficient. If you have single screen, single line display, when you move from first screen to second screen, you have to keep the previous menu together if possible. Therefore, it means something meaningful like channel delete because you are in channel menu. That helps to understand much better. That helps you to keep the top level menu information in your head if you have only single line display, machine display. If you have pull down display, no problem, because when you click on this, you are both seeing channel and delete together. Therefore, channel delete is read as a phrase. Okay. So this is a good example. Insert new slide. So if you read it, it sounds correct. Insert section, insert comment, insert word art. So that helps a lot. And you see there are separators. These separators separate the blocks of actions that are related to each other, and each one each one should be at most 7 or 10 based on the short-term memory rules. If you have too many things as a list, understanding becomes very difficult. And when you have 3 dots, I'm going to have additional slides for this, but now let me explain. If you have 3 dots, that means there is a dialogue coming. If you don't have 3 dots, that means it's an action item. So if you select this, text box is inserted. But if you select this, table is not inserted. Rather, table insertion dialog is going to come. And when you have an arrow here, that means additional submenu is going to be displayed. These are the accelerators, Command Shift and Command Shift D, etc. This is from the Apple. Which menu comes where? Menu items should be ordered based on the following structure. This is the rule. I sometimes ask this in the exam. If there is a platform standard, comply with it. For example, file, edit, etc. So file, new, open, close, etc. Those are platform standards. Then frequent tasks should come top and left for Latin speaking nations. If you write from left to right, former tasks should be placed before latter, such as first semester, second semester. So there is a chronological order. Again, before after relation, then before should come before, at the top or to the left. If you open something, then close later, open should come before close, because you cannot close before opening. Okay. If none of them applies, use alphabetical order. If there are no relations, use alphabetical order. But please order. I have examples. This is one example from Internet Vergi Dairesi, or it's from the banking application, but tax payment. I am trying to pay my tax but the user interface uses abbreviations that I don't understand. Since these items are not familiar to me, I can have no idea. So this is very difficult. And they have no help file to explain this. And unfortunately, you have to look for additional information from the internet to be able to use which number is the one that you are looking for, because you think you want to pay for some simple tax. But in the dialog, in the menu, you have a lot of items that are not familiar to you. So, for example, çiftçim. And also that also shows there are a lot of exceptions in tax policy. Different ways of doing same thing. If you have additional devices, not only pull-down menus, but other things, for example, on TV or any kind of industrial device or small screen devices. Sometimes they open on sides. Try to keep the title if possible. Therefore, current mode stays on screen. Arrow keys and OK select keys are used. So it's kind of numerical keypad along with the OK select button. The recent trend, this used to be the standard up until 2 or 3 years ago. Today, we dropped numerical keypad. Most smart TV screens have an arrow control at the top and some limited number of keys here, and that's it. Arrow keys, and at the center of the arrow key, probably there is an OK button, and that's it. Because you are monitoring the screen for what's happening. In the older days, a lot of things were done with single clicks through the remote control. But later, the interaction on screen is very improved. Then having multiple action buttons on remote control is not needed anymore. If it's a dental application, these should contain the logical layout of the application. So what is going on in the application? When you have multiple levels of menu like this, try to offer as many choices at the top if it's a desktop application, and use maximum 3 level or less. Going above 3 level means you are doing something incorrectly. You are doing things that should go into dialog boxes, into menus, which is wrong. So 3 levels or less is good levels of menu. Group vertical entries. This says maximum 4 or 5, but 7 is good. So vertical entries must be grouped with these separators. These separators are really important. And you have 3 dots if there is a dialog coming. No dots if it's an action item. When you have too many things, as I said, you click here, this menu come, then you say, okay, Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is the one I want, and let me move from here to here. What happens? What happens is this menu disappears because you are crossing the other menus region, and furthermore, in some applications, drug and supplement menu is displayed. Although you are trying to move to Parkinson's disease from Health AZ, since the Parkinson's disease is the way to Parkinson's disease goes over to drugs, accidentally drugs and supplements are displayed. So that should be eliminated. This is not good. How do you prevent that? Put some delay. If you open this, put some delay so that if the user is moving from health to Parkinson, it should not matter if you temporarily go over drugs and supplements. Probably you are not going over drugs and supplements on purpose. It is a travel route. You should not expect people to do this movement. So that won't happen. You may prevent this error by not putting too many things in this region. So if you open your menu as follows, then it may work. It might be better. Please watch that. And when you have too many things, although it is not as good, but some applications require that, it's an alphabetical order. It's kind of alphabetical order, but with some additions. They needed separator here. So this is kind of an interesting example. As you move through menus, feedback is required. So inverse video is needed. Furthermore, when you release when you release mouse here, first you have to flash the menu item, then turn off the menu. If you turn off the menu without flashing, user may think it is not selected. So this is required, if possible. If possible by the framework. Let me show it. So this is my PowerPoint. Now I am going to insert a new slide, and let's observe. I am going to do it with the Command N, and let's observe the menus. See, new presentation. Shift N, Shift Command N. As you see, insert is flashed briefly. So I can understand that something is selected from here. Therefore, and if I go here and say new slide, pay attention to the menu item. There is feedback. After the feedback, the menu is disappeared. So that is important. So the guideline is frequency of use, sequence within the task, standard order used in Windows, chronological if time is relevant, then alphabetic if no ordering is applied. Use alphabetic ordering. The wording in menu entries should be based on jargon that is used, that the user is familiar with, as I said. And the wording should be consistent throughout the application. I have explained this. Yeah, I have explained this. Sometimes we see check marks for toggling items, and these check marks in some older applications, in some other device menus, smart device menus, are indicated with dots, selected or unselected. That's also an interesting way of interacting, and it means that that item is selected. It's a toggle item, and that toggle item is selected through the menu. It's becoming less and less common. Yeah, I have said this. Try to have shortcut keys and access keys for devices that have that may not have mouse. But for the short keys, restrict these shortcut keys, restrict these for the most commonly known. So shortcuts should be limited. If you provide shortcut for everything, then people cannot use it. Like copy and paste, those are, for example, most commonly known ones, and they are used. And provide feedback when selection is made. That's what I said. Even with the shortcut. Functions, controls, alts, options, win keys, etc. Those are the shortcut issues, and sometimes you lose the positioning device. In those cases, try to have a plan B for that purpose. Apple has a different approach. Apple assumes that you have mouse, but if you do certain operations or start certain settings, there is a disability mode that also use keyboard for navigation. So accessibility, not disability. Accessibility modes can be turned on and off depending on how you want to use it. Next is the tab. Tabs are controls that are used to present low-level visual menus. They are usually associated with activities that require more than one screen for completion of data entry tasks. So it's basically data entry or setup with the tasks that can be grouped, such as this. These are data entry tasks. You have one tab, second tab, third tab, etc. These are tabs. So how do I organize tabs? There is a front tab, and there are other tabs. Front tab should contain the most necessary information. The other tabs should contain the optional information. If other tabs also require filling, then you should have here next. So this next will take you to the next tab. You should have it as a key. Otherwise, if you don't have this, these will be regarded as optional by the user. They never look at it. So these are the labels of the tabs. The guidelines are label tabs to the tab control with meaningful descriptors on the function of the tabs. Ordering tabs is the same as ordering for the menus. So frequently used items, first items, chronological relations. If nothing happens, alphabetical order is preferred between the tabs. Like first semester, second semester, second and third semester, etc. So this should be first, second, and third, one after another. Lastly, we have toolbars here. Toolbars are common. They have been common, and they are still common. They are still common way of interacting in graphical user interfaces. Usually you have a row of buttons containing icons located at the top of the window below the menu. Sometimes they are at the bottom or at the left, depending on how you organize your application. You may have toolbars on the left and document area here, and the toolbars on the top and sometimes on the right. If it's a graphics intensive application, you may have toolbars everywhere, and you may also have floating toolbar. In the floating toolbar, you can put the toolbar anywhere you want in the screen so that it will be close to where you are working to accommodate Fitzlow principles. You bring the toolbar to the space that you are working on, so getting things from the toolbar becomes much more easier than going through the corner of the screen. Arrangement, for example, there is a group of toolbar here. Group of toolbars. So toolbars are grouped actually, and in the new applications also, let me show that. Here we have toolbars at the top. See, these toolbars are grouped with the vertical bars. So grouping is interesting. These are grouped. For example, this graphics part from here to here, there is no separator, so there are groups among toolbars. See, there are groups. These are groups. Oops. For the toolbars, we use icons. This is an example of toolbar again. Here is the separator, here is the separator, here is another separator. About the functions of the user, about the functions of the icons, ask user which are the most significant things to be put on toolbar. Do not put everything into toolbar because that will be too crowded. So try to put frequently used ones or needed ones to the toolbar. Divide the functions in the toolbar into groups based on functionality. That's what I said. Use icons and make sure that these icons are understood by the users. Use application-specific icons that the user would recognize a lot. And use supporting text, help text in mouse over. So if you go over the tool, it may explain what it does. So that helps a lot, but do not rely on that. That is only for the help, only for one time, not all the time. Mouse over is only help. It is not a way of navigation. These are all the icons, but famous icons. That's from the book, like mailbox icons. This is attach. This is launch. This is mail. This is turn on, calculate, calendar. This calendar is only available in United States, this kind of Rolodex calendar. So other people cannot understand it. This is link, like search, World Wide Web, trash, and file cabinet. and so on. Finally, we have command and action buttons. Save, OK, cancel, store. So these are buttons. These are called as command and action buttons. They are referred as disposition buttons. So when you click on them, dialog finishes. You have a dialog. You have a button somewhere. When you click on it, okay, dialog completes. If dialog completes, okay, then we call it as disposition. We call it as disposition buttons. Sometimes they open additional dialog boxes. So one dialog brings up another dialog, such as properties. So cascaded dialogs can exist. Again, those are command and action buttons. So how am I going to use them? These are generic disposition buttons, and this is specific task buttons. When you click on this, some other thing, some other window comes up. So what are the guidelines on this? For labels and identification, use standard names and meanings for generic windows or macros buttons like close, clear, exit, help, cancel. So use standard names in Turkish or in English or French or whatever, but use standard wording. Use appropriate feedback when the button is clicked. This is also interesting. You have a window and you have an OK button. What happens when you click on OK button? You expect the window to go away. But if you erase window, as soon as you click, it doesn't work nicely. You think that it is crashed. So what you expect is, after you click, it should give feedback, then the dialog goes away. So it should briefly change its color. It should briefly go down. It should briefly go down as a feedback, then dialog should disappear. You don't have to make funny animations for that, but it should have slight feedback before disappearing. Otherwise, that button is felt like a fixed stone rather than a something movable button. So when you click on the button, it should go down. Even if it works, it should go down, then it should work. After it goes down, it should activate. So not only appearance, but also animation of the button is important. Use appropriate access keys for certain platforms and disable buttons that are not available at the time. Same thing is for menus. If the menu item is not available, disable the menu item. Okay. If the button is not available, for example, if save is not available, so gray them, make it disabled so that save is not possible. There is no new data. If there is no new data, save is not possible. For these feedbacks, we can actually, I am not going to give breaks. I am going to finish early. We have a technique called transition diagrams. Transition diagrams are used for analyzing how events are related to each other in interaction design. In the HCI case, human computer interaction, events are triggered by the user mostly. For example, user clicks on the mouse and interface changes to another state. Window opens and becomes active. So that's another state. User selects an option from the menu. Interface goes to another state, a submenu state. In an interface, the menu, toolbar, command, action buttons, transitions, all can be modeled, showing initial state with arrows, leading to each of the other states that could be triggered by the event. So it's like an event, multiple event state diagram can represent a user interface. That can be modeled with arrows and nodes representing state and arrows representing state change. So simple state diagram. Furthermore, we can have transition diagram. In the transition diagram, these states are represented by text. So similar behavior like starting of the menu structure from the horizontal menu. When user clicks on any of these entries, submenu appears. When user clicks on any of the action buttons, secondary dialog appears. User clicks on the icon and toolbar, secondary dialog appears. So these kind of description can be very big and tiring for complex applications. We write these things when only necessary. For design. We don't do everything because most of them will be similar to each other. In order to simplify these writings, there is a user action notation standard. Not standard, but way the method is described. In the user action notation, certain symbols are used to indicate user interface state changes. One of the famous one is movement is represented with tilde. Mouse down, mouse up. Feedback. Okay. So for example, when user says user action is tilde icon, mouse down, means user is clicked on a mouse or clicked on an icon. So instead of saying user clicks on an icon, this can be written down in design phase. For example, double click. This is what double click is. Okay. Click and drag. click, drag, release. So it's like carrying something from somewhere. The whole set is here. Move cursor, click down, click up. Grouping actions, parentheses is fine. Multiple times is star. One more time is plus. Enclosed action is optional actions for all logical operators. Display, erase, outline, blink. Blink object multiple times. Object follows the cursor, so highlight the object, dehighlight the object, etc. So these are user action notation descriptions. If you are going to study formally in designing better interfaces for new devices and new interactions, or if you are going to study in more detail, these notations can be used to formalize your study. So in order to numerically represent how user interface is good, how one user interface is better than the other, these kinds of representations can be put into database and compared among different user interfaces. So it is good for analysis. It's good for formal analysis. Other example, these are from the books. Go to file icon, click. Interface says file icon flashes, and gives the feedback. Interface then selected. User does this, moves it from one coordinate to another coordinate, and release the mouse. As user does that, system changes the color of the icon so that it is labeled as selected. Then this is moving, for example. The computation is location, file icon location is changed. This is quite old, actually, from 1990. But still, it can be useful from time to time to analyze what is happening. We have gone through this. You should either give message or put a feedback in certain locations, usually at the bottom, because in a desktop environment, you have the keyboard and you have the screen. So this area is the most significant area that user might be looking at. Usually, it is within your view. So status messages can be put in these lower level of the screen. Sometimes it is put at the upper level, sometimes lower level. These are examples of status information, progress bar, dialog, and this is for status. It is showing me something, but I don't have to respond. If something goes wrong, if something is dangerous, we have alert and warning messages. These messages are used to alert the user to possibly destructive process or irreversible action irreversible or destructive process allow the user continue or back out. The icon is important, label is important, and there is title to main message, an explanation how to respond, and response options. These are all important. You should not randomly pick an icon here, randomly pick a word here, and put nothing here. They're all important. Your understanding automatically combines information from all those places into one. Saying something is not sufficient. Also displaying icon and the other wording is important. The title is also important. There are two types of errors, not message types, but error types and messages, I would say. One error type is slip. You make an error, but you know the correct one. The only problem is you clicked to the wrong button or you couldn't type it. It's sometimes called as typo. The second one is more important. It's mistake. In the mistake one, user's mental model has incorrect input. So you don't know how to write, for example. You believe that, okay, you believe that the guy's name is this. The correct one is N. But what you believe is Tanpınar, so you type Tanpınar and cannot find the book because you make an error and that error is mistake. However, you can type M because M is next to the N. On the keyboard, they are close to each other in Turkish keyboard. Since they are close to each other, you can type M instead of N. That is what we call slip. And messages are quite different. Message designs are quite different when slips and mistakes occur. In both cases, the message should combine error and help processing to overcome the error. The response should include brief message telling what is wrong and how to correct it, and then offer more in-depth help. How to write that? Write those error messages in goal and action format. That is, you were doing this, you were looking for the book of Ahmet Hamdi Tanpınar. If you say that, people will realize that, oh, I am not doing it. I am not looking for the book. I am trying to send an email. So they can realize what is wrong based on what was their goal, because what their goal is sometimes different than what you understood as an interface. That happens in offices. That happens in offices all the time. You wait, you apply for something. As you are applying, after 2 hours, they say, this is not the correct place for this. We are getting applications for other things. Then you realize that you have been waiting there for a long time. So the error message should say, you are applying for dormitory and you forgot your income. If you hear that voice, you suddenly recognize that you have not been applying for dormitory. You have been applying for transcript. Therefore, income statement is not necessary. Therefore, in the error message, the goal must be repeated. Maybe the person has a different goal and he or she will wake up by rereading the goal briefly. Use a meaningful title in the box. Title means the thing you write here. So title must be meaningful. Usually, some people do it as alert or error. A standard name, no. You have to put a some meaningful text there. Then word messages in the jargon of the user, based wording on the user's mental model, not the programmer's mental model. Use examples in the messages, such as when the user has entered an incorrect format or date. Show an example in the message, so how to enter a correct date. And present error messages at an appropriate time. Don't wait until to the end. If there is an error, show on the way. If you have multiple sequences in the interface, do not show all the errors at the end. Make error processing as early as possible. Okay. Use selection controls rather than entry controls for difficult to remember items so that errors are reduced. And never erase, I repeat, what user has entered on the screen. Instead, highlight the errors and allow the user to correct it, because user cannot remember what was the incorrect one either. If you enter Ahmet Hamdi Tanpınar, then he may keep entering the same thing, or he may say, what was wrong with it? So don't erase what he has entered on screen. As you are entering data, there is a flow. It could be typed, it could be punched, it could be selected from the menu with the mouse, or it could be keyed from the screen. There are general guidelines. One is the flow. It is for Latin-speaking countries. There is a Gutenberg principle. Gutenberg principle. This is Gutenberg F. The visual scanning and information flow focuses in the top and left part, and through that you have additional content from left to right. So from top to bottom, from left to right. So from top to bottom, left to right, there is a flow, and use that kind of flow in your data entry, because generally you have multiple fields. So this field, this field, this field, this field should come one after another. You should follow the flow and from left to right. Be consistent. Try to make selection fields, lists, checkboxes, then reduce the memory loads using visual clues and defaults for text box fields and selection fields. So having these default values allows you to enter correct values. Alignment is quite important. I see your graduate projects, graduation projects are very cumbersome sometimes. You don't pay attention to alignment. So alignment is important. How do we align? The rule is align captions. These are called captions. Captions must be aligned, and vertical alignment lines must be minimized. What is that? I'm going to show. These are you don't have to align everything. because if you align everything, then it will be only one column. Therefore, aligning everything is not an option. You should have multiple alignment lines, but number of alignment lines should be minimized by adjusting the density. So this is one alignment line, this is another alignment line, this is another alignment line, and this is another alignment line. So alignment, these are called as alignment lines. Also, this is aligned. These two are aligned. Okay. Yeah. Symmetry, empty space distribution, distribution of empty space, symmetry of the space, the space here and the space here must be equal. Space here and space here must be, not must be, if it looks like equal, it should be equal. Otherwise, you can have this kind of asymmetrical designs as well. You can have this, no problem. But if you do this, these two should be equal. If they look like they are equal, they should be equal. What else? Moving from field to field using the tab key. As soon as you bring up the data entry, set focus to the starting point and activate the field so that you can start typing immediately without clicking on the field. And using color highlight for the current active field is very important. So caret is there. It's probably yellow or pink. The field is yellow or pink, and as you start typing, it should start type into the field. This is text field. It should be active without mouse intervention. You can type as soon as the window comes. These data entry is of two kinds. One is form-based and other one is conversational. Form-based data windows are paper-based documents. That's for advanced users. It's like filling the paper form. Okay. Conversational ones are wizards. These are for less frequent tasks, such as reservation systems, online registration, interactive games. So one after another, one after another. So asking questions and getting the answers. So it contains more dialogue. If the user has if the user may have problems obtaining information properly, then conversational data windows are better. Again, as I said a while ago, if the form requires decisions on the way, such as selecting where to go, and depending on where to go, you may have other options to show, then conversational data windows, data entry windows are necessary and preferred. If it's a form-based data entry window, it should look like the original source document. Scrolling paging strategy must be followed. There must be page breaks and regions, different regions, so that user can focus on certain regions of the document. Just like the menus. In the menus, you have separators. In the forms, you should also have separators separating different parts of the data to improve understanding. And you may have multiple pages. You may have page number and page footer. When you have multiple page form, you may have 1 of 3, 2 of 3, 3 of 3, and submit. So that should be displayed at the top and at the bottom in the status area. We have set this. Even if source documents has no grouping, divide the data being collected into logical groups so that people on the computer screen expect things to be grouped. In the paper, for example, you have a brochure. You have hello and long text. If it is paper, it's okay. But if it is on the computer screen, it cannot be read. So what? You have a title here, some text, another section, some text, another section, some text. You have to divide data into groups if it is on computer screen. Similar principle applies for forms. If the paper document has all continuous list, fine, but if it is on the computer screen, grouping helps. So if you are designing for web and getting some information from the company to put on the web, increase number of paragraphs, increase number of headlines, increase number of titles of the paragraphs, number of items, so that the information is divided into multiple chunks. For the conversational windows, make density about 30%, 20 to 30%. That means 75% white space should be available, like Google design. Apply an appropriate next strategy. So scrolling or paging must be understood well. If the amount of data to be collected exceeds the size of the window for a certain stage of the conversation, consider using tabs. But if it is necessary in the tab, next should go. This is the conversational window, and you have tabs. So next should take you to second tab. The tab in the second, you should take the third and fourth and fifth, and then submit. So tab control is fine as long as you can move in the tabs by the next button. Yeah, these are the same. Organization of data in the window should be based on the user's conceptual model. That's the idea. How do we design it then? First, make a list of all data that needs to be collected. Then group that data. Then design the captions. What kind of captions? Adı, soyadı, sınıfı vesairesi. Then identify which type of data entry controls. Is it going to be text box? Is it going to be radio button? Is it going to be pull down menu? How? Lay out the window then. It could be on paper or a prototyping tool. Then ask the users, is it good? Make a test with the user. Then start coding. Do not use captions to label all data entry fields using language of the user. Do not use abbreviations or codes unless it is known to all users. Do not bold captions. Align captions left or right, but be consistent. Follow captions with colon if caption is positioned beside the data entry field. Okay, if it is like this, it may not be required. Use captions to show formatting, such as telephone, 0533, etc. So that gives a clue. And this is an example about the captions. These are the captions. So it says, for example, year, DD. So it gives information about how to enter data here, like credit card number. Caption may have the same hint. For the text box fields, maximum size should be given. Try to make defaults. Flexibility in acceptable values such as uppercase or lowercase should be allowed. Leading zeros, number of decimal places, and whether you use comma or dot as a decimal place, that's very important. And if you use parentheses and dashes, dots for phone numbers, that is very helpful. I'm going to stop here because we are going into other issues with the selection fields and radio buttons checkboxes. Those are quite important, so I will. I'm a little tired now. I will continue that next week. Actually, I won't be here next week. I will be in Ankara for a meeting. So I will make a makeup class probably the day after on Wednesday or sometimes later. Which day is suitable for you? Let me know from the group chat during the week.
Hocam, I have a question.
Yes.
Will you share the slides with us so that we can work until the midterms?